I still remember how the day began, just like any other. The sun was rising lazily over Los Angeles, bathing the city in its golden light. The streets were already alive with the hum of people heading to work, the distant sound of car horns blending with the early chirps of birds. For me, the morning was about routine. I kissed my wife, Sarah, as she poured a cup of coffee, her warm smile a reassuring start to my day. Our 2 kids, Emily and Jake, were still upstairs, lost in their dreams, the soft sound of cartoons lingering from the night before. Life as a firefighter isn't easy, but it's a calling. There's a pride that comes with putting on that uniform, a sense of purpose that grounds you even on the hardest days. At the station, the camaraderie was always palpable. We were more than colleagues. We were family. Each of us had faced flames together, had trusted one another with our lives. And there's a bond in that trust that can't be broken. That morning at breakfast, Sarah looked at me with those knowing eyes of hers. "Be safe out there," she said softly, her hand resting briefly on mine. It was the kind of reminder that carried the weight of love and worry. I nodded, not wanting to linger on the unspoken fears we both held. The station was buzzing as usual when I arrived. The team was already gearing up for the day, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint smell of smoke that seemed to cling perpetually to the walls. The chatter was light, jokes flying across the room to ease the tension that always lurked beneath the surface. But as the hours unfolded, the air began to shift. A dry wind had picked up, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of something ominous. It wasn't long before the call came in. A wildfire had broken out in the hills just beyond the city. The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent, the words slicing through the room like a cold blade. We all moved as one, the weight of what lay ahead settling in silently. Wildfires weren't new to us. We'd seen them devastate neighborhoods, consume forests, and leave behind a haunting silence. But no 2 fires are the same. Each one carries its own ferocity, its own unpredictability. As we loaded into the engine, I couldn't help but think of the families in those hills, the homes that might already be in flames. My mind wandered briefly to my own family, to Sarah and the kids, and I pushed the thought away. There was no room for hesitation when lives were on the line. The drive to the site felt both endless and all too brief. The sky ahead was already darkening, thick plumes of smoke rising like sinister pillars against the horizon. The air grew heavy, the heat oppressive even from a distance. We could see the flames dancing in the distance, an uncontrollable force of nature that seemed almost alive. As we approached the fire line, the radio crackled with updates. Structures were at risk, evacuations were underway, but not everyone had made it out. My heartbeat quickened, adrenaline surging as we pulled into position. The team moved swiftly, each of us knowing our role, the training kicking in like second nature. The roar of the fire was deafening, a constant reminder of its power and our vulnerability. Yet in those moments, fear takes a back seat. You focus on the task, on the hose in your hands, the water hitting the flames, the shouts of your team over the chaos. Every second feels like a battle, a dance with danger that leaves no room for mistakes. And even as the heat stung my face, as the smoke clawed at my throat, there was a strange clarity, a sense of purpose that kept me moving forward. The fire was relentless, its hunger insatiable. As we fought to protect the homes on the edge of the inferno, I couldn't shake the thought of the people who had lived there, of the memories that might already be reduced to ash. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of it all, of how quickly life can change in the face of forces beyond our control. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of red and orange that mirrored the flames. We were exhausted, drenched in sweat and soot, but we pressed on, knowing that the fight was far from over. I didn't know then how much that day would change everything, how the fire would come to define more than just the landscape it consumed. But as we regrouped for a brief moment of respite, the weight of the battle settling heavily on our shoulders, I felt a strange stillness, a calm before the storm that none of us could have predicted. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to become part of our growing community. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we explore the extraordinary stories of courage, faith, and transformation. Together, we can share these powerful experiences with the world. The moment that changed everything came without warning, as it often does in this line of work. We had been battling the flames for what felt like an eternity, the fire stubbornly refusing to yield. The night had fallen, and the darkness was pierced only by the eerie glow of the inferno and the flashing lights of fire engines. The air was thick with smoke, its acrid taste clinging to the back of my throat, a constant reminder of the danger that surrounded us. We had received word that a small group of residents was still trapped in one of the neighborhoods that had been overtaken by the fire. Evacuations had been ordered hours ago, but not everyone had managed to escape. Whether it was due to fear, disbelief, or sheer bad luck, there were people still out there, and we couldn't leave them behind. Our team split up, each of us tasked with searching a section of the area. My partner, Mike, and I were assigned to a narrow street lined with homes that were barely visible through the thick haze. The heat was oppressive, radiating from the flames that licked at the edges of the road, threatening to consume everything in their path. As we moved cautiously through the street, calling out for anyone who might still be inside, the reality of the situation hit me. The fire was moving fast, faster than we could predict, and time was slipping away. Every second counted. Every step brought us closer to the edge of the unknown. That's when we heard it, a faint cry, barely audible over the roar of the fire. Mike and I exchanged a glance, the urgency in his eyes mirroring my own. We followed the sound, our boots crunching against the scorched ground, until we reached a modest single-story house at the end of the street. The flames were encroaching, their glow casting sinister shadows on the walls. The windows were dark, but the cry came again, unmistakable now. Without hesitation, we forced the door open, the heat from the fire outside rushing in behind us. Inside, the air was thick and suffocating, the faint smell of smoke mingling with the scent of burning wood. We called out, our voices echoing through the house, and then we saw them, a woman clutching a young boy, her face pale with fear, her eyes wide and pleading. "We're here to get you out," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face as she clung to her child. Mike took the boy in his arms while I helped the woman to her feet. She was trembling, her movements slow, as though the fear had rooted her in place. We moved quickly, the fire growing closer with every passing moment. The house was a maze of smoke and shadows, each step a fight against the growing heat. As we reached the front door, a loud crack echoed behind us, a beam collapsing, sending sparks flying like fireworks. The fire was relentless, a living, breathing entity that seemed determined to trap us. Outside, the air felt almost cool in comparison, though it was still heavy with smoke. We guided the woman and her son to safety, handing them off to another team who would take them to the evacuation center. But there was no time to celebrate. The fire wasn't done with us yet. Just as we turned back to regroup, an explosion rocked the street. A gas line, ignited by the flames, erupted with a force that shook the ground beneath us. The blast was deafening, a shockwave of heat and sound that threw us off our feet. For a moment, everything was chaos. The world spinning, the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I opened my eyes, the world seemed to move in slow motion. The fire was everywhere now, an unstoppable force that consumed everything in its path. My gear felt heavy, my body aching from the impact of the blast. But as I struggled to my feet, I realized that Mike wasn't beside me. Panic set in as I called out for him, my voice hoarse and cracking. Through the haze, I caught sight of him, pinned beneath a fallen beam, his face contorted in pain. The fire was closing in, the heat unbearable, but there was no way I was leaving him behind. Summoning every ounce of strength I had, I moved toward him, the flames licking at the edges of my vision, a reminder of just how little time we had left. The moment I reached Mike, the heat was unbearable. The fire roared all around us, as if alive, fueled by a hunger I couldn't comprehend. His breathing was labored, his eyes squinting against the smoke that curled through the air like an oppressive fog. The beam that pinned him down was heavy, its edges charred from the flames, and I could feel the seconds slipping away with each failed attempt to lift it. "Hang in there," I muttered, though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring him or myself. My gloves were slick with sweat, the material of my uniform soaked through from the relentless heat. I threw my weight against the beam, my muscles screaming in protest, but it barely budged. Mike coughed, a rough, desperate sound that cut through the chaos. "You've got to go," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "Save yourself." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Leave him? That wasn't an option. It never had been. Not a chance. I shot back, my jaw set with determination. "We both get out of here, or neither of us does." The smoke thickened, choking out what little light remained. The fire's advance was merciless, its flames dancing ever closer, their heat licking at my back like a cruel reminder of the urgency. My mind raced, searching for a solution, any solution, when my hand brushed against a jagged piece of metal on the ground. A crowbar. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me hope. I wedged the crowbar beneath the beam, leveraging all my strength against it. The seconds stretched into an eternity as I pushed, my muscles trembling with the effort. And then finally it gave way. The beam shifted just enough for Mike to pull himself free, his movements sluggish but determined. I grabbed his arm, slinging it over my shoulder to support his weight, and together we stumbled toward the faint glow of the exit. The moment we burst out into the open air felt like emerging from another world. The cool night breeze hit my face like a blessing, though it was still tainted with the acrid stench of smoke. We didn't stop moving, not until we were far enough away from the flames to catch our breath. Mike sank to the ground, his face pale and drawn, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe the worst was over. But then, I heard it, a distant rumble, low and ominous, that seemed to reverberate through the ground. My heart sank as I turned back toward the inferno, the realization hitting me like a freight train. The fire was spreading, faster than anyone could have anticipated, and it was heading straight for a nearby canyon where evacuation efforts were still underway. I didn't hesitate. I radioed the command center, my voice steady despite the dread clawing at my chest. "We've got a new flare-up," I reported. "It's moving toward the canyon." "I'm going in?" Mike reached out, his hand gripping my arm with surprising strength. "You've done enough," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Don't do this." But I couldn't walk away, not while there were still lives at risk. I placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent promise that I would be back, and turned toward the fire once more. The heat was like a wall, oppressive and unyielding, but I pushed forward, my determination outweighing the fear that threatened to consume me. It was as though I had stepped into another world, one where the fire ruled supreme, its flames casting grotesque shadows against the blackened landscape. The air was thick with smoke, each breath a struggle, but I pressed on, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and resolve. The radio crackled in my ear, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of updates and orders, but they felt distant, as though I were moving through a dream. And then the world shifted. A deafening crack split the air as a massive tree, weakened by the flames, came crashing down. I didn't have time to react before the ground beneath me gave way, the earth crumbling into an abyss that swallowed me whole. Darkness enveloped me, a suffocating void that seemed to stretch on forever. In that moment, I was certain it was over. The fire had won, its wrath consuming everything in its path. But as the world around me faded into silence, a strange sense of peace washed over me, a stillness that felt utterly foreign amidst the chaos. It was as if I had crossed a threshold, leaving the fire and its fury behind. And then I saw it, a light, faint at first but growing brighter with each passing second. It wasn't the harsh, flickering glow of the flames, but something softer, warmer, like the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. It called to me, a silent invitation that I couldn't ignore, and I felt myself moving toward it, the weight of my fear and pain falling away with each step. The light grew brighter, enveloping everything around me in a glow so pure and radiant that it felt as though I had stepped into a realm beyond comprehension. The darkness and chaos of the fire were gone, replaced by a profound stillness that seemed to resonate through my very soul. I couldn't feel the weight of my body anymore, nor the heat of the flames that had surrounded me moments ago. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of peace, a peace so deep and all-encompassing that it brought tears to my eyes. I stood there, bathed in this ethereal light, unsure of where I was or how I had come to be here. The air around me was warm but soothing, and the silence wasn't empty. It was alive, as if filled with an unseen presence that watched over me. Then, faintly at first, I heard a voice, not with my ears but within me. It was a voice unlike any I had ever known, tender yet powerful, its words resonating in my heart rather than in my mind. "You are safe," it said, the words carrying a love so profound that it brought me to my knees. "You have fought bravely, but your journey is not yet over." I tried to speak, to ask who or what this voice belonged to, but I found myself overwhelmed by its presence. As I knelt there, I felt a hand, gentle and strong, rest on my shoulder. I looked up, and though I could not fully see the figure before me, I felt its essence. It was light, love, and compassion, all woven together into a form that radiated holiness. "You are here for a reason," the voice continued. "Your life has touched many, but there is more for you to do. There is a message you must carry, a purpose you must fulfill." The words filled me with a warmth that I couldn't describe, a sense of belonging and clarity that I had never experienced before. Images began to flood my mind, visions of my wife and children, of my team, of the people we had saved and those we hadn't been able to reach. And then, beyond them, I saw others, faces I didn't recognize, yet I knew they were connected to me in ways I couldn't yet understand. They were waiting, searching for something, and somehow I was meant to help them find it. The light around me began to shift, growing brighter still, until it was all I could see. The voice spoke one final time, its words echoing through me like a divine command. "Go back. Share what you have seen. Be a beacon for others in the darkness." And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I opened my eyes to the charred ground beneath me, the acrid smell of smoke filling my lungs once more. My body ached. My gear felt impossibly heavy, but my heart was steady, my mind clear. The fire was still raging, but now it felt distant, as though it no longer held the power it once had over me. I was alive, and I had been given a purpose. If this story has touched your heart, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. Type AMM below to show your faith and be part of this blessed community. And if you believe in the power of hope and transformation, give this video a like. It might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. Together, let's spread the light. The world I had returned to felt different, though nothing about the fire itself had changed. The heat was still searing, the smoke oppressive, and the roar of the flames deafening. But something within me was transformed. Every step I took felt purposeful, driven by the words I had heard, the presence I had felt. My body ached, yet my spirit was lighter than it had ever been. I was alive not by chance, but by grace. As I rose from the scorched earth, I noticed my surroundings with a clarity that was almost otherworldly. The chaotic blaze, the swirling embers, the shadows cast by the fire. They were no longer terrifying, but seemed almost symbolic, a reminder of the fragile balance between destruction and renewal. I took a deep breath, the smoky air stinging my lungs, and steadied myself. There was no time to dwell on what had just happened. The mission was clear. I had to act. The radio crackled in my ear, bringing me back to the immediate danger. The fire was advancing rapidly toward the canyon, where countless evacuees were still gathering. Command was calling for reinforcements, their voices edged with desperation, and I knew this was where I was needed. Without hesitation, I adjusted my gear and began moving toward the heart of the danger. As I made my way through the inferno, a strange calm settled over me. The fear that had once gripped me was gone, replaced by an unshakable resolve. It was as if I were being guided, each step illuminated by an unseen hand. I encountered obstacles, fallen trees, walls of flame, and collapsing structures, but none of them could deter me. Somehow, I knew that I wouldn't face this battle alone. When I reached the edge of the canyon, the sight before me was both harrowing and humbling. Families huddled together, their faces streaked with soot and tears, clutching what few belongings they had managed to grab. The fear in their eyes was palpable, but beneath it, there was something else, a flicker of hope, fragile yet unyielding. I called out to them, my voice steady and loud enough to cut through the chaos. "Follow me. We'll get you to safety." Their gazes turned to me, hesitant at first, but one by one, they began to move. I led them through a narrow path that skirted the edge of the canyon, away from the advancing flames. It wasn't an easy journey. The smoke was thick, the terrain uneven, and the fire's heat unrelenting. But step by step, we pushed forward, driven by the shared determination to survive. As we walked, I thought of the vision I had seen, the faces of strangers who seemed to be waiting for something only I could give. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I knew this moment was part of it. These people, frightened and vulnerable, were more than just evacuees. They were a reminder of the sacred duty I had been entrusted with. We reached the other side of the canyon, just as the flames closed in behind us, their roar growing louder, their light casting eerie shadows on the rocky walls. Relief washed over me as I saw a group of first responders waiting with water, blankets, and transport vehicles. The evacuees were ushered to safety, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. One woman, her arms wrapped tightly around her young daughter, stopped before climbing into a rescue vehicle. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved us." Her words lingered in the air long after she was gone, a quiet affirmation of the path I had been set upon. This wasn't just about putting out fires or saving lives. It was about something much deeper, something that transcended the physical. It was about faith, hope, and the power of a single act to ripple outward, touching lives in ways we might never fully understand. As the rescue vehicles pulled away, I stood at the edge of the canyon, the fire still raging behind me. My body was weary, my uniform charred, but my heart was steady. The mission wasn't over. In fact, it felt as though it was only just beginning. As the fire raged on behind me, I found myself standing still, caught between the chaos I had just escaped and the newfound clarity that burned within me. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from the weight of something far greater, a calling that had been etched into my soul. The smoke lingered in the air, but I felt no hesitation, no confusion. I knew why I had survived. I knew what I had to do. The team regrouped near the canyon's edge, their faces streaked with soot and exhaustion. Each of us bore the marks of the battle we'd fought, but there was no time to rest. The fire had shifted again, its path unpredictable and devastating. It was heading toward a densely populated area, a neighborhood where families were still struggling to evacuate. Command was coordinating efforts, voices over the radio sharp with urgency, but I could hear the underlying tension. Resources were stretched thin, and the clock was ticking. "We've got to move," one of my crew members said, his voice rough and strained. I nodded, but my thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the vision I had seen in the light. The faces of strangers, the message I had been given, it all felt connected to this moment. These weren't just random events. They were pieces of a puzzle, each step bringing me closer to understanding my purpose. As we drove toward the next site, the air inside the engine was heavy with silence. My partner, Mike, who had barely made it out of the earlier collapse, sat beside me, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He had been quiet since we'd regrouped, but now he turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and something else, gratitude, maybe, or reverence. "You shouldn't have come back for me," he said softly. "But you did. Why?" The question lingered in the air, and I searched for the right words. How could I explain what I had seen, what I had felt? How could I put into words the certainty that had gripped me, the sense that every action, every choice was part of something far greater? "Because it wasn't your time," I said finally, my voice steady. "And because I wasn't alone in there." He didn't press me for details, but his silence spoke volumes. There was something unspoken between us now, an understanding that didn't need words. He gave a slight nod, his expression softening, and we returned to the task at hand. The next few hours were a blur of smoke and flames, of shouts and sirens, and the unrelenting push against a force that seemed insurmountable. Yet, through it all, there was a quiet strength within me, a certainty that we were not fighting this battle alone. I saw it in the way my team worked together, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. I felt it in the moments of calm amidst the chaos, in the way the fire seemed to shift just enough to give us a path forward. As the night wore on, we managed to evacuate the neighborhood, ensuring that every family, every soul was accounted for. The fire continued to burn, but we had won this small victory, and it was enough to keep us going. Back at the station, as the first light of dawn broke over the city, I found myself alone for the first time since it all began. The exhaustion hit me like a wave, but so did the memories, the light, the voice, the undeniable presence that had guided me through the fire. I thought of Sarah and the kids, of the life I had almost left behind, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude, not just for my survival, but for the clarity I had been given. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My life would never be the same. This wasn't just about fighting fires anymore. It was about something far deeper, something that had been placed in my heart like a burning flame, a light that refused to be extinguished. The morning after the fire felt like the quiet after a storm. The city was still shrouded in a smoky haze, the remnants of the wildfire leaving scars on the hillsides and streets. But as I stepped out of the station, I was struck by the silence. Not the silence of destruction, but the kind that comes when life takes a moment to catch its breath. It was a pause, a space to reflect on everything that had happened. I drove home in that silence, the weight of the previous night's events pressing against my chest. The streets were eerily empty, save for a few scattered cars and weary neighbors inspecting the damage. Yet, in the midst of it all, there were signs of hope, people helping one another, sharing water, offering comfort. It reminded me of what I had felt in the light, that unshakable connection that bound us all together. When I walked through my front door, Sarah was there waiting for me, her arms wrapped around me tightly. And for the first time in what felt like years, I let myself lean into her embrace. Emily and Jake came running down the stairs, their faces lighting up with relief as they threw themselves into the hug. For a moment, I didn't have to be the firefighter or the survivor. I was just a husband, a father, a man who had been given another chance. We sat together at the kitchen table, the early sunlight streaming through the windows. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. How could I find the words to explain what I had seen, what I had felt? But I promised myself that I would in time. For now, it was enough to simply be with them, to soak in their laughter and the small, ordinary moments that I had come so close to losing. Later that day, as I stood on the back porch watching the sun dip low in the sky, I felt a familiar stirring in my chest. The vision I had experienced, the words I had heard, they weren't just for me. They were a call to action, a reminder that my survival wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something far greater. I wasn't meant to keep this to myself. I was meant to share it, to be a light for others in their own darkness. The fire had taught me so much, not just about the fragility of life, but about its resilience, its beauty, its meaning. I had seen the worst of what nature could unleash, but I had also witnessed the best of humanity. The courage, the compassion, the unwavering spirit that rises in the face of adversity. And now I understood that my purpose wasn't just to fight fires. It was to remind people of the light that exists within them, even when the world feels engulfed in flames. As the stars began to appear in the sky, I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For my family, for my team, for the strangers whose lives had touched mine in ways I couldn't yet comprehend, and for the chance to be part of something so much bigger than myself. If this story has moved you, I invite you to join our community of faith and resilience. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to hear more stories of courage and hope. Together, we can shine a light in the darkness and inspire others to find their strength. Let's build something extraordinary, one story, one heart, one life at a time. The days following the fire brought a mix of exhaustion and reflection. News outlets called it one of the most devastating wildfires Los Angeles had seen in years. But amidst the tragedy, there were countless stories of resilience and unity. People who had lost everything came together to help rebuild. Strangers became friends, and communities that had once seemed distant were now bound by shared loss and hope. Back at the station, my team was hailed as heroes, but I knew in my heart that the real hero was the presence I had felt in the fire, the light that had guided me when I was lost, the voice that had reminded me of my purpose. It wasn't about me or my actions. It was about something far greater. That understanding gave me peace, even as the weight of what I had experienced lingered. I spent more time with my family, cherishing the small moments I had once taken for granted. Watching Jake kick a soccer ball in the yard, hearing Emily's laughter as she told me about her day at school. These were the things that mattered most. Sarah often caught me staring at them with a smile, and though I didn't say it out loud, she knew. She could see the change in me, the gratitude that ran deeper than words. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I sat down to write. I wanted to capture everything, the fire, the vision, the message I had been given, not just for myself, but for others. It wasn't enough to carry it in my heart. I needed to share it, to remind people that even in the darkest moments, there is light. That even when it feels like the flames are closing in, there is a hand reaching out to guide us through. As I wrote, I thought of the faces I had seen in the light. They were no longer strangers to me. They were the people I was meant to reach, the lives I was meant to touch. I didn't know how or when, but I trusted that the path would reveal itself. All I had to do was walk it, one step at a time. The fire may have burned the landscape, but it had also planted seeds, seeds of renewal, of faith, of hope. And just as the scorched earth would one day bloom again, so too would the lives of those who had been touched by this event. It wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. As I finished writing, I looked up at the stars, their light steady and unwavering. They reminded me of the vision I had seen, of the voice that had called me back. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need them. I had faith, and that was enough. If this story has inspired you, don't stop here. Click on the next video appearing on your screen. It holds a revelation that could change your life forever. Join our community, where stories of hope and transformation remind us that we are never alone. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let's continue this journey together. Your light is waiting to shine. Just take the next step.